All right, folks. So we heard the sort of unfiltered liberal response to this. Now we are going to hear from Bernie Sanders, who once upon a time you may have thought would sound somewhat different from Rachel Maddow and David Hogg, but here he is towing
what a clown,
towing the neocon line in just shameless fashion here. So this is the guy who we thought represented the left, just really, really embarrassing himself in this response. I have the whole thing. It's 4 minutes. It's sped up. We might get through the whole thing. Let's see how much of this we could take, because it's not just what he says here, but what he doesn't say that I think is important.
For joining me to discuss a very, very serious issue. Yesterday, we witnessed an extremely sad moment in American history. We saw the President of the United States aligning himself with the dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, to undermine the independence of Ukraine and its democracy. Let's be clear. Trump is showing us that he sees one of the world's most brutal dictators as his friend and our longtime democratic allies in Europe as his enemies. He wants a world that is safe for authoritarians and oligarchs, but extremely dangerous for democracies. It will not surprise you when I tell you that Trump is lying, as he so often does. Yesterday, Trump said that Ukraine started the war. That's not true. Russia invaded Ukraine twice, first in 2014, then again in 2022. Right now, Russia occupies about 20%.
The guy who honeymooned in the Soviet Union.
Since Putin's horrific invasion, over 1 million people have been killed or injured every single day. Russia continues to rain down hundreds of missiles and drones on Ukrainian cities. Putin's forces have massacred civilians and kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, bringing them back to Russian re-education camps. These atrocities led the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant for Putin in 2023 as a war criminal. Further, Trump called Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator. That's not true either. Zelensky won 75% of the vote in free elections. In fact, his approval rating is higher than Trump's. In the midst of a brutal war, Ukraine's parliament continues to function and free and unfettered political debate takes place.
Okay, we're going to pause it there. We're going to go back. We should play the whole thing, but we referenced this in a previous clip in case you're watching the clip version. This is an unironic headline published by Newsweek. There are concerns that the Ukrainian president could be voted out of office if the country holds an election. That's the spirit of openness and, transparency and debate that Bernie references there.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a country that maintains a hit list that Roger Waters is on.
Jimmy Dore is on it. I'm surprised we're not on it, to be honest. I mean, I guess we're not famous enough yet. Someday. Yeah,
we're not big. We're not big enough to make the radar of the garroting crew.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that day and informing my wife. Hey, great news, honey. You hit the big time. Oh,
remember
really?
I told you I wanted to have a politics show?
Did you get a TV show? No, we made the Ukrainian hit list. Yeah.
Doesn't look like they're going to have that much longer.
Hopefully not. All right, here's the rest of Bernie.
Trump claimed that our European allies have done little to support Ukraine in its fight against Putin's invasion. He said the United States has contributed 3 times more than Europe. But that's another lie. In fact, Europe has provided more aid to Ukraine than the United States. But it's not just that Trump is lying again. That's not new. It's what this all reveals about where he wants to take our country, and in fact, the entire world. Trump is cozying up to Vladimir Putin. So who is Putin?
God.
And what kind of world does he want to build? Putin is a dictator.
Bill Kristol could have given this
Russia's
speech.
movement
The
toward
Lincoln
democracy
Project could have written
after the
this.
end of the Cold War. Russia holds sham elections every 6 years where Putin wins 90% of the vote and authorities don't even try to hide their ballot stuffing. There is no freedom of speech or free media in Putin's Russia. Protests are violently suppressed. Tens of thousands of people are in prison for protesting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Political dissidents are harassed or thrown into jail. The bravest, people like Alexei Navalny, are killed outright. Hundreds of thousands of Russians have fled Putin's brutal regime since his invasion of Ukraine. But Putin has maintained control in his country by offering Russia's oligarchs a simple deal. If you give me absolute power, I'll let you steal as much as you want from the Russian people. And that's why in a country where many are struggling economically, Russian oligarchs have stashed trillions of dollars in offshore tax accounts. That is the Russian leader that Trump admires. That is the Russian oligarchy that he supports. But that is not the perspective of the American people. We know, and we are proud of, the fact that the United States of America is the longest standing democracy in the world. We know that many hundreds of thousands of brave Americans over the years have fought and died to defend democracy. We also know that our allies in the world are those countries that believe in democracy, not authoritarianism. In this critical moment in our history, I hope that every American, regardless of political perspective, will stand tall and say yes to democracy, no to oligarchy, and no to authoritarianism. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I know that was really tough to sit through, so I apologize for subjecting you all to it. But the reason I did want to play the whole thing is because I want to be able to talk credibly about what he did not say. And unless we played the whole thing, I wouldn't be able to really credibly make this point. If you wanted to be a total pussy, if you wanted to get your pot shots in against Donald Trump because you're so subservient to your party overlords that you just can't not go out and trash Trump in response to a thing like this, what you could have at least said to try and trick some left-wing people into thinking you're somewhat aligned with them at this point is you could say the Ukraine war should not have happened. It's horrible that so many people are dying. It's time to wind this war down. We need to make a peace deal. But how dare Donald Trump exclude Ukraine from the talks? He could have done a big thing about that. He could have made a big show of how dare you not give them a seat at the table. Yes, we agree we have to end the war, but they should have it. Like, you could have done that bullshit dance. It would have been bullshit, but at least that would have been
even
shown.
That wouldn't
like,
have gotten any traction, but it wouldn't have been as
right. It wouldn't have gotten any, but there would have been some effort, some olive branch to the anti-war left. No, instead, you give an address that Bill Kristol could have written for you literally word for word. The Lincoln Project could have written that word for word. That's the direction you go. That is really a low in a career of recent lows for Bernie. I mean, that was just incredible. Just full mask off NEOCON.
Well, that's why Shama, she didn't mention it here. I think she's going to unveil it tomorrow. The organizing slogan of Worker Strike Back is going to be, "We don't fuck with Bernie."
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was really, really a low. Let's get some responses to this. Nico House, duopoly destroyer. Bernie calls Putin a dictator, but has no words for Zelensky, who has canceled elections, openly admitted he has no intention of pursuing elections anytime soon, and has eliminated competing political parties. I can't believe we ever took this guy seriously. He's a hypocritical clown. Johnny Graz, shut the fuck up, you neocon lapdog. That's what I said. It's a total neocon speech. Alex Knight, we are witnessing a very sad moment in American history, yes, where Bernie is sounding more pro-war than Trump. Absolutely.
Yep.
This is my favorite from Nick Cruz. Bernie Sanders is a Lindsey Graham Democrat. Yeah, exactly. He's even to the right. Like, the Republican Party has been cucked by Trump on this issue to the point where, like, even Marco Rubio, who was very hawkish on Ukraine, has now had to bend the knee. Not because they want to, but they have been sort of brought to heel by Trump into the correct position. Now, they had to be dragged to that position kicking and screaming because they are neocons, but they're more or less there. This is worse. I mean, this is worse than them. He's to the right of Marco Rubio at this point. Absolutely. So that absolutely holds. A Lindsey Graham Democrat, 100%.
This is, friend of show. You don't like my music. He was really trolling the Chris Hedges premiere. Not the members only thing. He would never give us his money, but he was
Right.
trolling that premiere. And
we don't like his money either, I guess.
Yeah. Why did you prefer Trump? Why did you prefer Trump? Okay, listen, that was a very, if you heard Keaton's formulation, he said it very well. With Russian roulette, with Trump, you got one chamber empty. Maybe he calls off the war in Ukraine. With Harris, we're just going full bore towards World War III.
Right.
I think that assessment has been proven right. In the end, it's hard to organize laborers with radiation burns digging through the ruins of the local supermarket for radiated cans of beans. So, hey, what are you going to do? What all the Democrats had to offer was possible nuclear war. and continued catastrophe. As far as Gaza and Palestine go, I would say at worst Trump's going to get there faster.
Yeah.
Harris emphatically promised to keep arming Israel. So where does that go? Where
Right.
does that go? What? It was going to be more peaceful, like less people killed. If you're going to keep arming them, what? Netanyahu on his own would have ended what they're doing there. So, Trump might be cutting to the chase, which is horrific. But I don't think you can make the argument that it would have been Switzerland or really a different outcome in the end under Harris. This Ukraine result really is the most that I think people could have hoped for, who were hoping that Trump would end this war. He's doing exactly what many people, not just on the left, have been saying should be done. Yeah, man, give them their Russian majority territories there in the east. Promise not to make it part of Ukraine. That's it. Part of NATO, rather. And that's it. I mean, this is what the whole left has been screaming since this started. Since those talks were sabotaged by Boris Johnson. This is what they could have agreed to years ago. The idea that the Democrats are still going out here, that they have not even been chastened by it's just absolute rout by their approval numbers, that they're still going to hold on to this. Who does Bernie think he's talking to?
Right. Exactly.
Like, who's the
Yeah.
audience?
Yeah.
Who are the people who once supported his presidential campaigns, who are not horrified by this? And who are the liberals who like him? They never liked him. They don't like him now. Who's this for?
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, it absolutely is a dead end politically, morally. It is abhorrent. And just as someone who is now going to go on the ground in places like Iowa and a couple other places he has, I think, on the kickoff of his anti-oligarchy tour, nothing tells you that that's a Democrat sheepdogging op more than this. And I know they may seem disconnected at first, but this is a guy who had his honeymoon in the Soviet Union. This is a guy who knows better than to be doing this. And so if he were not going to sheepdog you back into the Democratic Party, he would make a break from them on this, not put out such a shameless video where he is, yes, that could have been written by Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio before he became Secretary of State, the Lincoln Project, Bill Kristol. That's not an exaggeration. And to what Russ was saying, the randomness factor of Donald Trump, the sensibilities of Donald Trump, allowed for a possibility for things like this to happen. Now, that was nowhere near enough for us to support him. And there was so much that we abhor about Donald Trump to the point where that was never even a consideration. And no one in our corner of this space was as emphatic as we were that you should absolutely not vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, right? And people said, well, what are you for then? Well, in terms of good answers in that election cycle, there were none. Sometimes that's the answer. Sometimes you just have to tell the truth. And so that's where we're coming from in there. Donald Trump's plan for Gaza makes him a Nazi. I called him a Nazi. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. That's what a Nazi would do. A Nazi would bring the war criminal of our time to Washington, D.C. and grant him the ultimate victory and say, yes, we will ethnically cleanse Gaza for you. That makes you a Nazi. That's not an exaggeration. That's who he is. And I'm not shy about saying that at all. But he does bring to situations like this a randomness that allow for some good outcomes to take place on occasion. And this is not a small matter, this Ukraine war. This could have swallowed the entire world if Kamala had won. Like, we have to acknowledge that as well. Like, you have to keep it real about that as well, right? That's in no way an endorsement of Donald Trump, the man, or the president. His Gaza policy is utterly disqualifying. He should be in prison for that. He should be in prison for granting Netanyahu a victory like that, and then trying to sabotage the ceasefire just a couple weeks ago, which we screamed about, and apparently no one else in our space gave a shit, right? So, we've been holding it down pretty good on that front, but you can't just put blinders on when it comes to issues like this. This this could have swallowed the entire world,
Right.
and probably would have, honestly.
Well, and I think Arnaud Bertrand's analysis is probably spot on. We just saw, I sent this to you, that Pete Hegseth was talking about cutting the Pentagon budget. And, Bertrand's analysis is actually what these guys are doing is not random. They're recognizing that the empire is not sustainable, and they're doing a controlled demolition of it while they can manage the direction that takes instead of waiting for it to collapse under its own weight.
Right. Exactly.
Please clap.